Let's ease in with this question. My first question is, in screen dance, we tend to wear a lot of different hats. And it's maybe moved from a place of jack of all trade, master of none, being mute, perhaps now. And I just wondered, is there a favourite hat that you like to wear when working within screen dances, behind the camera, in front of the camera? Is there one, if you could pick one, what would be the one that you really enjoy?
I don't think I could. I think what I enjoy about screen dance is the culmination of different processes and the ability to kind of draw from different palettes, and the necessity to draw from different palettes to kind of create something that would just not be the same without any of those tangents that it's come from. I don't think I could, unless I was to just, if I was to pick choreography, then I'd make live work. So, yeah, for me, I think I could.
Do you guys, do you have an answer to that? Or is it simple?
I always just, sort of stop and pinch myself when we finally get into production. Like that first day, when you have everybody there, the cameras are ready, and it's just like, okay, this has taken 2 years perhaps to get to this moment. So it's always this moment that I just appreciate so much. But I love every step. I mean, the writing and the grant writing and the...
I don't know about that.
You get through it, but yeah, just that. But I love every stage of it. Doing the research, working with the choreographers, the dancers, writing, editing, being here to show the work. But just the sensation is priceless of, it's actually happening. We're about to shoot. It's beautiful. And when we were in India, they had this beautiful tradition
For Bhairava.
For Bhairava, just before the camera shoots, the beginning of each day, they bring out a coconut and incense, and they do a little ritual.
Yeah.
But the first day we were freaking out because we only had so much light, like the sun was just about to breach the horizon. but it was just, again, acknowledging that moment.
Yes.
It was really important,
yes.
and very much reflected how I feel at that time.
And I would add, it's almost like a dream time for me, where all different aspects start playing in my mind. And it's not that I can conceive of everything, but I start to imagine certain things almost arriving. And that's a very special thing. And I anxiously await those moments of dreaming, which allow the actual thing to unravel and come forward, which is great. It's a very personal thing.
I think I love all the different steps, not the grant writing, but I love the steps of the planning, and I've been shifting in terms of being behind the camera directing, and then when I started to work with Anna, I became the dancer again. So, but I still kept on filming, capturing some of the material myself, especially when she got just far too cold and had to go and retreat in the camper van. I thought I still need to have this shot. But what I felt when we did another piece that is going to be shown tonight, we worked in a bigger team, and then there were which was great, having a little more budget and more people involved. And also then I had a time constraint, and I couldn't be involved in the edit. And then I felt like that was a big part that I was missing, because I do thoroughly enjoy the choreography process of the editing. So while the other works we shared, so the piece that I showed, we edited different parts, and then we sent it back and forward for feedback. But the one tonight, I wasn't involved in the editing, and so I felt then that I'm involved in the piece, but it's become something different. And it's really enjoyable as well, but I'm looking forward now when I have more time to get back to that. So.
Thank you so much. If there's any questions from the audience, please ask now. Is there any questions from the audience at all? Yeah, one down here.
So I have two questions, but maybe first I will start with Heike. My question is, how do you prepare yourself to go and dance in the landscape? And how is it different than dancing in the studio? How your material is different, and do you feel that you dance with the landscape or for the landscape, or maybe with the landscape as just the background? Because we see quite a lot of films in the landscape, and I wonder how do people go to the landscape, and how do they prepare themselves to move in the landscape, and how do they,
Yeah, I understand your question. Yeah, thank you. It's a really, really interesting question. So for me, the preparation, I mean, I touched on it, I'm a wanderer, so that means that we really basically just pack we drive, of course we know the general direction where to go, but we look out and think, look at this, I think we need to go there. And then we decide, we stop and we pack our camera and we start walking. And just, I think it's kind of a dialogue with nature, so there's a lot of listening involved, so it's kind of this kinesthetic experience of what you capture in this environment. And I've only recently moved towards this kind of experience in a city, because I felt that I think I really, this longing of going into landscape and retreat and being able to hear, feel, sense, smell, all this information that landscape can give you. So there's a lot of sitting and laying involved. So you saw us laying, and we actually do that, you know. So it's just kind of listening with all your senses and trying to capture that. And then it's an intuitive, improvised movement that I allow to come. So it's maybe, although some of these things I guess you recognize, and of course I have a particular vocabulary that will be recognizable, but it's not that the plant material, not at all. And so we've developed this kind of communication between the camera and the dancer, because it can be quite frustrating when you're just focusing on something about your hands and she's only capturing your feet. Or, you know, it's so far out that you wouldn't be able to see this. So we have this kind of short code that we at least inform each other. I'm gonna pan and I'm gonna follow you all the time. And then when you saw me really far away, then we had a score like, okay, the moment I get up and I come running towards you. So we have this kind of broad scores that we maybe then negotiate while we're there. But it's also about so that everybody is involved in doing everything. So that means I often go behind the camera, Anna lays down somewhere, Iggy does all of these things. So it's kind of this, and it's a communication, the reflection that we have during the journey. And I usually do kind of extended journeys, so it's seldom that it's a day. It's like this was 2 weeks, and there was another one I did with 2 weeks. So there's something about living in a camper van with 3 people in the middle of nowhere that, you know, has quite an impact. There were 3 parts to your question, but I've talked for such a long time already. Yeah, so that's how I prepare. I don't prepare, actually. I seek the unforeseen. I prepare that I'm warm, I have food, I take care that I sleep. So I have somebody that makes sure we're safe. So Iceland is kind of an extreme landscape, so it's really important to travel with somebody who knows how to deal with that. You don't want to get burned in that hot water, which I did many years ago. So there are these things. I make sure that we can be open and sense. I think that's my preparation for such a journey. Yeah, thank you for that question.
Thank you. And another question, it's from the last presentation. It felt to me that everything was so easy for you. There was opportunities opening one after the other. There was so many contacts that fell into right places, and you started dancing, and then you went to do this course, and then you went to do that, and suddenly you are doing all those amazing things, and you have so many years of experience. And I'm just wondering if you are maybe at the beginning of this journey, how do you think of gathering skills and starting from one point, for example, a dance or holding a camera? What else do you have to open up to maybe get to work with this kind of equipment, you know, or 3D or
Right.
you know, to have big names or big
Right.
money.
I will say, just
Yeah.
to start off, just as kind of a foundation to it all, two heads are often better than one, in our case at least, that we complement each other in terms of abilities in so many ways. There's so many aspects to what we do, but the two heads really does
Right.
work.
And having somebody to share the experience with, because while we're showing you all of this work, we've been rejected so many times with applications, with funding, with broadcasters. You know, this is over 20 years, and I was in my 30s when we started working together. So there was years of study and work and trying to figure out direction before that of course you don't see in 15 minutes. But, you know, Joe, you would probably be a really good person to answer that question, just because, you know, you've, in the last 10 years, really brought yourself to the point of working professionally and whatnot. Not that I want to, I'm happy to talk to you in detail about it all, but I'm just thinking, you know, somebody who's just closer to that.
In terms of creating opportunities, tell me what you mean.
Well, I'm going to jump back in because
Yeah.
I think we could bounce off of each other.
Sure, yeah.
But I do think that there are certain elements that are absolutely necessary. Perseverance is a big part of it.
Yeah.
To be able to push further than what you think is possible, because rejection is just around the corner all the time. So you have to be clear, find out what your own clarity is, and then build on that so that you become effective in your communication. Branch out as far as possible to gain contacts and build a network of people. You know, when I said we have a repertory company of people, well, literally it is people we studied with, people that we knew in one way or the other, folks I had interviewed, et cetera, et cetera.
We do a lot of mentoring. It's a big part of my practice. I've been mentoring filmmakers, both dance filmmakers and documentary filmmakers, for at least 25 years. So if you could find some type of mentorship program to get involved in, that's a really great way to just really immerse yourself in somebody's practice and just learn from that. That would definitely be one way. But for your own artistic practice, it's really to work with, you know, what you have at hand. You know, initially I was in a studio and I had a little handycam camera, and I set it up on a playback monitor and started choreographing within the frame. I was still dancing at that time. It was when I started to become aware of the possibilities. So, you know, there are always tools there, and especially now with the mobile cameras, your students work a lot with iPhones. There are festivals for iPhone work. You know, you can start trying to get your work out. I don't really promote putting your work all over YouTube. I think it's better to curate your own work a bit more and be more selective of where you send it initially.
I also think there's a generational thing that's really important. So look at who's around you, in whether it's your dance environment, if you're in a scholastic, you know, in a university setting, a college setting, who's out there and who cross-disciplinary, in a cross-disciplinary sense, is available. So if there's somebody who's keen in communication studies and wants to do something with dance, jump on it. The worst thing somebody can say is no. The worst possible thing that happens is, okay, it doesn't work. But you can move on from that and you'll gain experience just from doing. And if somebody's working in sculpture and they want to work with dance, yeah, why not? And gain among your peers, because everybody knows somebody, build that circuit, build that terrain for yourself, because that's going to be really helpful. And knock on all the doors that you possibly can. That's the one thing, whether it's funding or whether it's just opportunity. There's more and more people who are tuned in a multidisciplinary, cross-disciplinary way that I think ever before. Part of that's by virtue of the internet and people having access to all kinds of information. But I think within university college settings, for example, but I also think within institutional granting settings, people are thinking in a cross-disciplinary way, for better or worse, because there are negatives to all of that as well, and we don't need to go into that today. But more specifically to your question, you throw out those ideas. Think of yourself as a fisher who's out there with a big net. What do you pull in? There's going to be crap, but there's also going to be gems.
Yeah.
Find it.
Yeah, I think for me it was really what you're saying about communication is really key, and really sort of nailing down what it is you want to do, but why these other people in these different contexts that they're sitting in, the different arenas that they're coming from, why they should be interested in it. And so many of the opportunities that I've had and the opportunities for learning that I've had and for kind of harvesting knowledge and expertise from other people has been done really by really convincing them that this is something that is worthwhile and something that I'm passionate about and that they should be passionate about too. And I think if you can really find that articulation in your work, in what you're trying to do artistically, but in the benefits of that for the art form, for the specific art form, but for the arts generally, and for culture and for engagement in something that isn't academia, it does make it more and more difficult for people to kind of to refuse or to turn away. Then if people have that interest, they may not be able to give you an opportunity, but there may be some knowledge that you can take from them or some insight that you can get from them that allows you to get deeper into what you're doing or to offer something more rich to a venue or to a programmer or to whoever.
Question for Philip and Marlene. This regards with working with high-profile choreographers, like Crystal Park, for instance. Just shed some light in regards of the post-production editing. If there is a situation that you have to edit something out, or change the choreography, or sort of like you discover that there's a stronger path by doing this or doing that was not original in the paper. If there is any hard feelings or any sort of like friction or any kind of negative situation because now it's a different thing than it was, and if that's a good thing or a bad thing in your guys' point of view?
Well, with all the artists that we work with, we establish from the beginning that we'll retain creative control over the finished piece, but we have them very involved in the whole process. With Crystal, it was a little different because she was a co-director on the project. Though she was not at all involved in the post-production component. I did the editing, Philip was there with me. I guess we sent her...
We sent her.
Yeah, we sent
material.
her rough cuts, which she approved.
Yeah.
We didn't have that much material because we had to shoot so quickly, everything, and we were seeing it in playback while we were doing it. So she would flag which performance she thought was stronger, like which take had the strongest performance. But it went well. But moving ahead to Bhairava, the film we're showing tonight, for us that was moving into completely new territory. We got to know Shantala Shivalingappa very well. So we were initially talking to her about doing a full-length production, possible documentary, and then it was narrowed down to the 13-minute dance film that we did with her. But because the music is so critical, the specific dancing that she does is so, it was just sort of beyond our understanding of, it wasn't like contemporary dance that we were more familiar with. So again, I ended up doing the editing, but I spent 3 days with her in Paris at her apartment, going through the editing process with her, just to really understand, like, is it, if we cut here, where we think it might be a great place to cut, is that just, totally destroying these really complex rhythm patterns that are built into both the movement and the composition. So she was there in the editing process, which was one way to avoid any misunderstandings.
Yeah.
I'm going to add, sorry, I'm just going to add something, or maybe ask your question.
No, I just it's great if it's maybe in the beginning and the artist is there and there is some sort of an exchange, but what if it's at the sort of at the end of before your picture lock and the artist is not there and you're getting maybe a test screening and then people say, oh, the beginning is slow, and you're like, oh my god.
Yeah.
So do you feel like, you know, you have the right to do whatever is the best, or you're trying to appease everyone?
You know, I think in our case, we haven't really had that experience where somebody came back and was really upset or angry or that kind of thing. But I'm going to go back to something even before all this issue of trust becomes really inherent to a big part of what we do in any event. So the relationships develop over time with many, many of the artists that we've worked with. I don't think, maybe in Clue there was a shorter period, but in almost every other case, with Shantala, I had been studying her work for years and writing about her work for years and interviewing her over a period of time. So we got to know each other. There was that trust that had developed with Crystal. Literally that project took, I think, 3.5 years to develop. And the writing and the meetings and the exchanges, all of this stuff develops in such a way, for us at least, that these are, I'm not going to say that we become friends with everybody at the end of the day, but they're deeper relationships than just sort of walking in the door, okay, let's shoot, you know, that kind of thing, and now we're going off to the editing suite. There's something else that happens. So if there are hicks along the road or bumps along the road, I think we start ironing out those concerns pretty quickly.
And contracts are involved in some of the work we do, and it's at that point where you're laying out the contractual agreement that you have the chance to discuss that with the artist that you're working with. And it's in those contracts that, you know, this is maybe less for our work, but I produce other dance filmmakers' work as well. And depending on their relationship with their choreographer and whatnot, and the distribution platforms that we'll be moving into, you know, where contracts are required, we do write that in, you know, so that it's clear and they can discuss it before the shoot, or before even getting involved in the contract, in the production, that the filmmaker will be retaining creative control over the work right through to the finishing process. And that does help a lot.
Thank you. See you, Marina. We'll come to Ingrid.
Oh, sorry. Okay. I just wanted to ask you about the film Dana. Is that right? Have I said that properly?
Sorry, which film?
Dana.
Oh, Dana Michelle.
Dana.
Yeah, Dana Michelle,
sorry.
The Greater the Weight, yeah.
Yes, that was in a studio, wasn't it?
That was in a studio.
Yeah, could you elaborate a bit more about how the lighting design of that space? Because you talked about using a lot of smoke in the room and lights, so just kind of, was that in a TV studio or was it in a dance studio?
No, it was in a theatre actually, a performing space, so it would have been, you know, for dance performance or theatre performance. One of our a major concern that we had initially was the issue of skin tone. So how would her skin be captured accurately with the camera? This is a huge concern, I think, and it's been a preoccupation in some ways of how to be accurate with all of that, and you know, so that was a big discussion that we had with Bill Carrigan, who was our director of photography. So, you know, everything from the costume that she had and how that would again match with the skin, but as well the overall design of the lighting.
Right, and Bill chose to bring in a very bluish light, which complemented her skin tone beautifully. And yeah, all the lighting was really around that. But then we also have this like key light, because we were going with this theme of a boxing ring. It wasn't something she had in her choreographic work, but if you see the beginning of the piece, she does incorporate boxing into her work, and it's a piece that's very energetic and does have a sort of fighting quality to it. So again, you know, with her agreement and in discussion with her, we decided to reference a boxing ring. So we had the ropes built, and when we were doing visual research for it, very often in, you know, I don't know, in the 50s or something, when everybody was smoking in boxing rings, the club would be full of smoke, and then you'd have this light beam from the top. So that was kind of that key light that you see her dancing into in, I think, the clip that we showed. So that was another element in our visual treatment that we were referencing there. But yeah, the smoke was really to just give it that quality that because we just found when full HD first came out, it was just like too harsh. It was just all you saw with crisp lines. We didn't feel it really.
It didn't warm, that notion of warming to the image. No,
Right.
It wasn't happening.
And where we had often shot prior to that with wide lenses and a handheld camera, often very much dancing with the dancer, this time we decided to be further away but work with a really long lens. So we had less distortion, because you do get that bit of distortion with the wide lens, even though you get that great dynamic sense of movement towards the camera. And it was through rehearsing. Bill's an amazing cinematographer. He's really agile with his camera. And his ability to follow her, because she was just so fast. And like, I just love that shot where she hits the ground. I don't even know if he knew she was going to, and he just like lands on it with her. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
So again, it was a lot of research with camera and the dance and decision to use that type of lens and that type of setup. They were all parts of our treatment.
Where can you see that film?
Pardon me?
Where can she watch the film?
Oh, we can send you a link.
Yeah.
It's part of your exhibition.
Yeah, it'll be in the exhibition from July 2nd to October 2nd.
Okay.
Come back. There'll definitely be a mouvement perpetuel focus.
Did each of you talk about detachment from your original intent and allowing the piece, when it's being developed, to take on a life of its own and begin to dictate, no, this is where you're going, even though this was your original intent?
All of us?
Yeah.
Shall I start? Sure. I think that the original intent is the journey, and then I don't know what's going to happen on that journey, because I don't know the places beforehand that we're going to stop, or that we're going to see and encounter, and the weather. I think all those pieces, the weather. So the intent is an exploration and as an encounter with nature. That's the kind of initial idea, and then from that memory and that embodied experience that I take with. So interestingly, when I start editing, I not only get kind of a kinesthetic experience of seeing, but also I can actually remember the sensation of having been at the space. So I can get the sensation of the scale and dimension in, for example, in the very first two scenes of the beach and the glacier. I mean, the dimensions were so vast that I can sense the space above my head almost, even now, just remembering. So it's this memory that then determines the idea of how we're putting the footage together. So it's a self-reflective encounter that I'm looking for, and I think that's the intent. And that's also how we're putting it together. So yeah, there's a lot of unforeseen and surprise, and that's the rich experience of that impact.
Yeah, I have a preoccupation really with sort of choreographically, at least, with sort of human experience and what it is to be human, and I'm very driven by emotions. And so with Calibrate, I had a few sort of starting points with that, but additionally I had this sort of to-do list as well with what I wanted to achieve with the work, and working particularly with my composer, to start to realise those things. And I have a very sort of analytical mind, and I can get all too lost in my thoughts and kind of theorising about everything. And in some respects, that's a really helpful thing, because it really helps me to understand what I'm doing and to understand, okay, what does need to be next? What am I achieving here? What am I not achieving yet here? But I'm very wary of it as well, because I know from experience that I make my best work when I'm working intuitively. And at that point, then I really just need to trust the more analytical work that I've put in. I need to kind of just clock to myself that, okay, I've done that. That's all been logged and categorised in my head and laid down. And that part of the process has been done over and over and over, and now I just need to surrender to the work, really, and allow it to speak for itself. I do really feel that I know I'm making good work when it's writing itself. And I love that point in the process. I really love that point in the process where you really have a sense of, oh, well, this is what the work's asking for now. It's developed its own sort of self-sustainability, and it's now, you're serving it, you're not making it anymore, you're serving it. And I really love that moment in the process where you hit that sort of tipping point.
Guards.
Well,
we have a couple.
yeah, you go ahead.
Well, we mentioned 1001 Lights, you know, how we were putting it out into the world and how it is actually being seen. It's quite different than what our initial kind of vision for it was, but we're really happy with the way it has evolved. But it did take the time to kind of let go of that, okay, the big monumental yet intimate experience to the, it can be in a tent, on a football field for a week in the Rocky Mountains of Canada, or it could be in a window of a small museum in Montreal.
There's another example I thought of when you asked that. So with Cru, you saw one little segment from the Urban Dance series. There's something about giving people in your team space in order to do what they do best. So one of the issues, and you mentioned it the other day, you know, when you're working in urban dance, there's that, you know, working with popular music, working with the music of the day is so important. Well, for broadcast medium, we couldn't because we couldn't afford the rights. We didn't have the money for any of that. So we had to bring in a composer to actually create the music in the style of. And the people who we were working with from the urban dance community were a little bit like, what are you doing? We need to have the music that's this way and that way. Well, the thing is, we had somebody who was very skilled as a composer. No, he wasn't from the urban dance field, but it ended up evolving. So it was giving that guy the space and some of the input. So we had one of the dancers come and sort of give him a crash course, kind of.
And he was in the studio with him.
Yeah. So what ended up happening was creating this happy medium where it could have been a disaster. And again, kind of fending off, and this is where the directing comes in, fending off kind of the negative possibility of people saying, no, you can't do it this way, no, we've got to have music that, it's kind of like, maybe not. Let's see where we go with all this. And, you know, it worked, in my opinion. It worked. That was a good example.
I definitely agree with that. And I actually remember, I'm just going to tell a quick story because we're about to finish. But the first time I met you, Philip, I was at the urban dance screening at Cine Dance. And I remember the screenings finished and one woman put her hand up and said, oh, I can never imagine working with hip-hop dancers in screen dance. But they just seem so untamable. And then a big discussion kind of blew up there. But I just think there's so much that can be told with urban dance, and I'm very passionate about urban dance on screen. And I'm big fans of you guys for years and years, so I can't thank you for the work that you're making. But yeah, I just wanted to tell that story because it's nice that we're able to see not just hip-hop dance, but all dances. Even your story with contemporary dance, we're seeing all these dances in new lights and allowing new audiences to see them in different ways and breaking the boundaries that they have, maybe just from staying within their technique or within their own community. So I think Screen Dance has the power to open and explore all. Yeah. Time.
Do we have time for one more?
We have 4 minutes.
I have a question. Can I jump in here?
Let's go, Anna, and then Ingrid will be our last question.
Thank you.
Sure.
I wanted to speak on, from 2 of you guys' presentations, the idea of pop-up art and installation and the excitement that we have in sort of exploring these different formats that the work can take. And I wanted to round it back to the question Simon proposed yesterday about this concept of a beginning and an end to a piece, and maybe the sense of obligation we have to find that or offer that to our viewers. So when you're considering an installation work and all the different forms that the work can sometimes take, and this idea of maybe getting 30 seconds or a minute of something, and just speaking on this sense of community that we feel, this idea of expanding our community by inspiring people and just pulling them in the most unsuspecting of times and unsuspecting of places. So I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that and the sort of give and take that we can sometimes feel, the openness to allowing the work to take on a life of its own and take on a different form, and the power that it might have in taking on its installation format.
Well, we were talking earlier just about the fact that when you're building your work, you're kind of beholden to this timeline, which is a very linear thing, right?
Yeah.
So even though you're understanding that it's going to be potentially starting anywhere, you do put that first shot in, and then there's a shot there before you can do the loop. So, you know, we do work within these linear structures, but I find there's like this incredible freedom with not having that beginning and that end, and, you know, not thinking that the sunset or the moonlight is going to be the end, but it could be taking us into another moment. Yeah, it's a whole new way of doing it for people who have been working in that beginning and end structure for so many years, but I find it very, it just opens whole new possibilities and a new way of thinking of rhythm and understanding, and, you know, hoping that, and also you're seeing every moment as a potential moment of engagement with the audience, right? So you're seeing be less things as bridges or setting things up as you might in a more narrative structure, and it's really about, I'm thinking like every moment has to be powerful on its own.
Yeah.
And that's a really refreshing way to be seeing things.
And I think it kind of, for me, in a kind of a logistical sense, it really sort of frees up the editing process. I think you know, I'm sure people's brains work differently, but certainly when I'm editing, I do work very much chronologically, because I kind of need to feel I need to know what's before so I can feel what needs to come next. And with this kind of editing, you can really just sort of let go of that, and you can hold a moment and say, I like that for what it is, and I don't need to worry about the build-up to it. As long as you were saying, it's strong enough in itself. And I think, you know, it comes back to the image itself, and just the power of the single image, and making that, giving that the
Depth.
the depth and the kind of the ordaining it with the power that it can hold by itself, without the preempting, without the build-up. And the build-up is beautiful, but to the challenge and the satisfaction of capturing something within a short space of time, being able to communicate something within a short space of time.
There's a exploration of time that then the setting maybe enables you to play with more. So for example, in a gallery, they had shots that were much slower, you know, just the rocks. Very slow motion, and I wouldn't let you see that for 10 seconds, you know. So I think, and not having that pressure of, so it's about the live body as well. So either the live body of dancing, or what's the audience doing? So are you sitting statically, or are you in a kind of a rhythm and motion as well? So it seems like the motion of the architecture, the rhythm of the architecture, the rhythm of the frames, on the frames, and us as engagers. And I think, how can you balance this kind of attention span, and it shifts?
And
I think our perceptual abilities, it's such a deep and interesting field in terms of what we retain and why we retain certain things, and the degree of time that's required for us to either hold on to an image, stay with an image, all those things. It's vast, and we could stay here all
know it is a
afternoon.
big question, so I really wanted to ask.
I'm so sorry, Ingrid, you're going to kill me. The time has finished. But please, Ingrid, grab one of them who you wanted to ask a question to. We can continue to ask questions out in the bar, out at lunch. But thank you guys for all coming. Can we have a round of applause for these amazing artists? So, back at 2 o'clock for our next talk, 2 till 4 with the next 3 artists, I believe. So, thank you guys.